Luffy was not meant to be JOYBOY. Not according to Whitebeard, not according to Shanks, not according to Kaido, and most importantly, not according to the Pirate King himself, Gol D. Roger. And what Fate did here, because fate is very real in this fictional world, what Fate did was pull a bit of a bait and switch, because the man who everyone expected to fulfill the will of Roger and thus the will of JOYBOY was Portgas D. Ace. Ask yourself this while you watch this video on the toilet like the entertainment-starved animal you are. Why was Ace born? Ask yourself that, and now listen to the answer. Roger said it as much himself in a conversation with Rayleigh post-Laugh Tale. I'm certain that voice was speaking the truth. Someone will be born and eventually surpass us. See, we were just too early. The One Piece, they call it. I wonder who will find it. That'd be my son, of course. The reason why Ace is alive isn't because his mother and father loved each other very much, and in fact loved each other a little too hard on one particular evening. No, that's the story for most of us. But Roger went out of his way to create this life so that Ace would inherit the will of JOYBOY. And I know that a lot of people watching this video will probably have experiences of parents having rather high expectations for them to become doctors, lawyers, architects, business people, etc. But this is on a whole different level. Ace was quite literally born to save the world. Roger believed it, Rouge believed it, and Whitebeard believed it. So after deciding that he would have a son, Roger said, I intend to meet with Whitebeard before I die. And during this meeting, Roger actually told Whitebeard what the Will of D thing is all about. In fact, Roger offered to tell Whitebeard pretty much everything. The only thing Whitebeard didn't find out was what he didn't want to know, like how to get to Laugh Tale and such. So Whitebeard very potentially knew about Ace, or at the very least the concept of a potential Roger spawn well before they met. Because I imagine that Roger is 100% the kind of guy who would brag about how his son, who he still had yet to conceive, was going to become the future man who fulfills the Will of D. And so Whitebeard may have been on the lookout, just waiting patiently for this candidate to pop up. When Ace was a rookie, we see Whitebeard keeping up with his career, gazing upon the bounty poster of an Ace who had freshly rejected an invitation to become one of the 7 warlords. But why? Not why did Ace reject the warlords. Why was Whitebeard even bothering to look at his bounty? Seems like an odd thing for someone with such an esteemed position to bother to keep up with new pirates. For example, Whitebeard definitely didn't pay anywhere near as much attention, if any, to Luffy's rookie days, even after the invasion of Enies Lobby. And that is despite the fact that Whitebeard was made aware of Luffy by Ace. After East Blue, Ace proudly shoved Luffy's bounty right into Whitebeard's face, which Whitebeard doesn't even pay enough attention to recognize that there is Shanks' straw hat. It takes all the way up to Marineford and meeting Luffy in person until Whitebeard goes, oh, I remember Hat. Something I really want to know is if the Roger-Whitebeard rivalry goes far enough back that he knew that Roger once wore the straw hat. Very potentially not, because Roger appears to have stopped wearing it quite early, even before he gave it to Shanks for some reason. Then again, Roger was a man of mysterious ways, as we recently learned in chapter 1096 when we saw a young Roger without a mustache, despite the fact that his Jolly Roger is a skull with his mustache that he does not yet have. So Whitebeard could have been in on this game. However, there is a scene in the manga where Ace confesses that he's Roger's son, and Whitebeard says, "Gah ha ha, this is a surprise." And that may be true, this may be a surprise. But you just know that as soon as Whitebeard heard that initial D, he knew that something was up. After serving under Rox D. Zebek and being a rival of Gold D. Roger, I feel like Whitebeard could take a look at someone who is roughly as many years old as Roger is dead and start to make some connections there. Even if Whitebeard wasn't aware from the very get-go, hearing about Ace's heritage still must have stirred something within him. Because from Whitebeard's perspective, Ace is the closest thing to a JOYBOY that he or anyone else is likely to find. A very convenient garden of inherited will, spawned from the seed of Roger, cultivated within the rich soil of Rouge, harvested by the heavy-handed farmer Monkey D. Garp, and sold to the New World grocery store where Whitebeard plucked him off the shelf. And after hearing all of that, how do you not buy into the hype? So of course you're inviting Ace onto your crew to sharpen his potential and have him likely be the guy who is going to bring about the dawn of the new world. It all seems very easy, perhaps too easy. And this might also be why Whitebeard was so negligent about following Monkey D. Luffy, because he thought he already found the right guy with Ace. No other D's required. And for some time after Roger's execution, I also bet there was a point where Whitebeard was wondering to himself if Marshal D. Teach was going to be the man to inherit Roger's will. Whitebeard let him aboard the ship before he even understood the will of D. So this could have been a nice fateful event. Instead, it was a not so great fateful event, because we all know how that story goes. But it's so satisfying because during Marineford, Whitebeard says to his face, "You're not him. The man Roger is waiting for is definitely not you, Teach. Just as there are some who inherited Roger's will, someone will eventually do the same for Ace. You can sever bloodlines, but their flames will never be extinguished. It has been passed down like that since ancient times. Someday, one will arise who will challenge the world and shoulder centuries of history. So obviously Whitebeard said this after Ace's death. However, I would suspect that Whitebeard sort of knew that Ace wouldn't be the one to fulfill Roger's legacy even before that, but only slightly before that, because Shanks also alluded to Luffy when Whitebeard asked how Shanks got his left arm taken off. Shanks replied that he gave it up for the sake of a new era, but Whitebeard didn't put two and two together until he found himself standing beside Luffy at Marineford. And when interacting with Luffy, I'm sure that Whitebeard got flashbacks of a young Roger and probably deduced that this was the real JOYBOY. And it's hard to tell how accurate this is to the original Japanese, but something I love about the English translation that has aged very, very well is that Whitebeard calls Luffy a quote cheeky devil, which, intentional or not, references the will of D and its status as the enemies of the gods. So I think that Whitebeard left this world knowing that Ace would be able to rest because the future would be fine in Luffy's hands. He wasn't the only character to be deceived by fate though. In fact, Whitebeard wasn't even the only emperor that fate pulled an epic prank on, because weirdly enough, the character who has actually said the name JOYBOY most in this series is Kaido. Towards the end of the raid, you just couldn't shut him up. JOYBOY dreams, JOYBOY themes. You couldn't be JOYBOY either, it seems. But cutting back to pre-time skip for a bit, why did Kaido try to go to Marineford? The report stated that his goal was to kill Whitebeard, which is very possible. It's also very possible that Kaido's goal was to use this as an opportunity to start that big old war he always wanted, because three factions would get incredibly messy, and if the Beast Pirates were to have shown up, the Marines almost certainly would have lost and plunged the world into global anarchy. But there is another explanation. What if Kaido suspected that Ace was JOYBOY and went to Marineford in order to confront him? Ace was a known quantity to Kaido due to Ace's time on Wano. He and the Spade Pirates actually went all the way to Onigashima with the mission to kill Kaido, but at the time he was away on a fun excursion. So instead, Ace got drunk with Yamato and vandalized Kaido's base, which definitely would have resulted in Kaido holding a grudge against him. Maybe Kaido didn't know a single thing about Ace being Roger's son, but he still couldn't stand the thought of letting Ace pass into hell without seeing retribution for the insult that Ace left him on Wano. It's like waiting until someone is out of their house, breaking in and taking a shit on the dining table. But then, even if Kaido somehow didn't hold a grudge, Yamato likely wouldn't shut up about Ace. And Yamato also spoke at great length about two other things, those being Kozuki Oden and JOYBOY. Kaido even showed a fair bit of concern when he heard Yamato name drop old JB. I wonder where that kid heard it. Yamato dropped JOYBOY's name. Apparently Oden's desire to open the country is meant to welcome JOYBOY. If he's the same man you're waiting for, King, then I think I know who JOYBOY is. He's the man who shows up to beat me in the future. So what if Kaido does some dragon maths and puts all of this together, and with the very obvious hints comes to the conclusion that Ace is JOYBOY? Ace is a very public D-wielder. Fate saved him from confrontation on Wano. Yamato has a bit of a thing for him. And if Ace was JOYBOY, then Kaido could not let him leave this world without making good on his words that JOYBOY would be the person to finally bring him down. But Kaido didn't end up getting to Marineford, and we still don't know exactly why. Because yeah, Shanks intercepted him, but how did Shanks stop him without resorting to war? A very simple explanation would be that Shanks informed Kaido that Ace was not, in fact, JOYBOY, because at the time Shanks knew that it was Luffy. And so a very sad Kaido turned around, went home, and decided to watch some Netflix instead. And Shanks knew this because he had already been previously deceived by fate. When you think about it, it's incredibly convenient, isn't it? The idea that Shanks was in Fuchsia Village for a whole year and never found out that Roger's son was living in the mountains right next to him. He really didn't know. Why was Shanks in Fuchsia Village in the first place? And why did he have to be there for a whole year? As far as we're aware, he was there to steal the Gomu Gomu no Mi from the world government, but spending a whole year just doing that, I don't know, seems like a long time. If so, he needs to take lessons from Luffy's time management, because Luffy was already halfway to becoming an emperor a mere year into his journey. So was this all some colossal coincidence of fate that Shanks was based on the same island as the son of his beloved captain? So this has led to a lot of speculation that Shanks was there on purpose, and he was very aware of Ace's presence in the Goa Kingdom. And from there, the plan was to acquire the Gomu Gomu no Mi and give it to Ace, because who better to entrust the future of the world than the son of Roger? Until one day when the fruit was eaten by Luffy, and Shanks briefly thought that he doomed the entire world before realizing that he'd been looking in the wrong direction this entire time, and Luffy was always the one who was destined to obtain the fruit. It's a cool idea, but the evidence that supports the idea that Shanks knew anything about Ace's heritage is a bit shaky and of questionable canon. When Ace comes to meet Shanks in the New World to thank him for saving Luffy, Shanks doesn't recognize him, and you'd figure that he'd be keeping tabs on the son of Roger if he was aware, kind of like how Whitebeard was, and kind of like how Shanks always had his pulse on Luffy. Furthermore, Shanks says, "You're Luffy's brother? I didn't know he had one. You're welcome here. Tell me all about your adventures." And that's true. Luffy didn't even meet Ace until Shanks sailed away and Garp had a bit of a tantrum about this whole pirate business. That doesn't mean that Shanks was unaware that Roger's son was residing in the Goa Kingdom, but he might not necessarily figure out right away that it was Ace, although that would become clear very, very quickly. The Ace novels detail this event in much more detail. Do I really not have a synonym for detail? No, apparently I've used all of my synonyms for today. In the books, during this meeting, Ace makes an active choice not to reveal that he's Roger's son, primarily because that's not how he wants to be known, and Ace also doesn't want to use that as a potential reason for Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates providing him any kind of protection or assistance, because Ace's aim was to declare war on the 4 emperors, the warlords, and the world nobles all on his own. However, Shanks' dialogue in the book is interesting, because he and the Red Hair Pirates keep making these allusions to Roger. They ask Ace about becoming the Pirate King, they drop the wealth, fame, and power line, and they use Ace's full name, Portgas D. Ace, as if they're potentially aware of the connection, especially because Ace does reveal that he was born on Batera in South Blue, but it's like the Red Hair Pirates are waiting for him to come forward with it. And so let me just read the final section of that chapter when Ace leaves Shanks. For playing like he didn't care, he sure thought a lot about Captain Roger. He even called him Gold D. Roger at the end. That was a rare thing from a young person nowadays. A faint smile played over Shanks' lips. This was different from the silent grin he always wore. Ben Beckman felt like it had been ages since he saw his captain smile with actual emotion like this. So this could be a very sneaky acknowledgement that they knew all along. Or this could be the moment where Shanks put the pieces together and realized that his captain spent most of his final year alive in the bedroom producing this young man who had now appeared before him. But also, I don't know, maybe not. I could just be reading into it too much because I'm trying to find something. Either way, this meeting is such a cool moment because it's Roger's biological son meeting Roger's found family son that he raised. And another cute little connection is that Makino was the one who taught Ace proper etiquette for when he inevitably met Shanks, so Makino was basically teaching a child to be polite to her boyfriend. And also in the Ace novels, there is a point where Shanks finds out that Luffy is Garp's grandson, which I don't know about because Luffy was very open about his name being Monkey D. Luffy. Surely that connection would have been made earlier. Again, there's a lot in question there. I really don't know how seriously to take the books, because what they do is they tell canon events that happened, but not necessarily in the exact way they happened. They're quite deceptive, much like Ace. Because really, if you were looking for a sun god, then Ace fits the bill. Everywhere he goes, Ace brings smiles. To Tama and Yamato on Wano, to Oz Jr. by giving him a hat, to Moda and her parents during his cover story, and even to Vice Admiral Kommel, who thanks to Ace, now has serviceable coffee to drink every morning. And when your average person thinks of a sun god, I feel like Ace fits the more literal description a lot better. Ace burns bright like the sun. In fact, he can even conjure a miniature sun himself. His devil fruit basically turns him into a personified sun, capable of providing light and warmth wherever he goes. So Ace does embody all of the joy and literal elements of the sun with the fire and the light and such, although I will say that he is certainly lacking on the liberation front. After a night of drinking with Yamato, he left the enslaved Wano citizens to their fate and got his whole crew absorbed into the Whitebeard pirates, and then got all of the Whitebeard pirates lured into a marine trap. So if anything, Ace is not the warrior of liberation, he would be the warrior of subjugation. So maybe that should have been the clue. There was always something just a little bit off about Ace, and how conveniently he came in to fill the void left by Roger. It's almost as if Ace's fate was to be a decoy, to take all of the obvious attention whilst quietly building Luffy in the background. Because if not for Ace existing, Blackbeard would have captured Luffy and turned him into the world government to become a warlord, and so it would have been Luffy who was sentenced and likely successfully executed by the world government. But luckily for the world, we had a decoy in place ready to take that hit, and unluckily for Ace, he was that chosen decoy.